these, what I'm going to show you is some more of the material that I've been accumulating as part of my long-term project of studying the postal history of Macedonia. Here are a few things I recently acquired. This is a map labeled Turkey in Europe. And all the area that's darkened, that are outlined in colors, this was all part of Turkey in 1850, which is when this map was supposedly made. Just to orient you here, we've got, this is the Adriatic Sea, this is Italy, the Italian boot is here, the Dalmatian coast down to Albania. Greece, most of Greece is down here. The northern part of Greece was still part of Turkey at that time. In 1830, when the Greeks won their independence, it was only the lower portion of modern day Greece that was independent. So Thessaly is here, Epirus, and a lot of areas. These are not countries, but they're regions that are labeled by the terms we now recognize. We got Croatia here, Bosnia, Serbia. Romania at that time was two provinces, Wallachia and Moldavia. Bulgaria here is a region, but you will find that there is no reference to Macedonia on this map. Instead, we have a region roughly right here called Roumelia, Roumelia, and it includes part of what is now northern Greece. Here's Salonika, and all the way over to the portion of Turkey of the present day Turkish Republic, which is still in Europe. This name, Roumelia, by the way, for any of you international or worldwide collectors, you've probably seen in your albums an entity called Eastern Roumelia. Well, if you ever wondered where that is, that would be the eastern portion of this territory identified as Roumelia. Part of it later became incorporated into Bulgaria. For a brief time, it was called Southern Bulgaria or South Bulgaria, and stamps were issued for that territory for a brief time. The rest of it is now part of Greece. I read in one source that the name Roumelia originally harks back to Rome. In other words, this is a territory once part of the Roman Empire, referred to by the Turks as Roumelia. Now, I'm not certain that that's correct, so that's only one theory as to where that name came from. The fact that there's no Macedonia on this map is rather significant because starting in the middle of the 19th century and continuing all the way well into the middle of the 20th century, there were Macedonian nationalist organizations, revolutionary groups that were intent on, shall we say, building up or creating a Macedonian national identity. There were groups, the famous Internal Macedonian Revolutionary Organization was basically a terrorist group that was involved in many incidents of great historical significance. The king of Yugoslavia, King Alexander, was assassinated in 1934 by a Macedonian nationalist. And so that one of the things that tells you is that even after the Turks were driven out, the Macedonians still weren't satisfied. They wanted national recognition. And there are stamps that they created later that say Kingdom of Macedonia. I'll show you some of those as we go further into this. This is a postcard. A picture shows a village, Megarovo. It's in Macedonia, in the territory traditionally identified as Macedonia. And on the other side, you see the stamp. This is still during the Turkish period. It's 1911. And the cancellation is a monastery, which a name apparently used by Greeks and Albanians because of a well-known monastery. Christian monastery was located there, and they began to refer to this town as, because of the monastery, monastir. This is the story I've got from every source I've looked at, and it's the best I can do as to the meaning of this name. This is
general question, Alan. Do the people of Macedonia speak perfectly normal Greek, or is it dialect or anything like that?
No, it's not Greek at all. It's Macedonian. It's called, the language is Macedonian, but it's closely related to Serbian and Bulgarian.
So the Greek demands that Macedonia is an inherent part of Greece has no linguistic justification, just a historical one.
Not in terms of the Macedonian language. No.
Okay.
Right. The southern part of Macedonia has a lot of Greeks living in it, and that is now part of Greece. But the Macedonian as a language is written in the Cyrillic alphabet, and it's closely related to Serbian and Bulgarian. I was going to mention that this town, Monastir, is now known by a different name, Bitola. And I was curious to know, how do you get Bitola out of Monastir? And there's an answer to that, which we'll get to in a few moments. This is the postmark. I turned it over so you can see, it says in Latin characters monastir on the bottom, and probably Phil can read that.
That's just a literal translation of monastir into Arabic characters, yes.
Now, here we are. This is a propaganda postcard from 1913, immediately after the First Balkan War. It's inscribed. I don't know what the first two letters stand for here, but this is King Peter, and it's Le Roi Pierre. This is the Serbian king liberating the Macedonian maiden. He's got these chains here and striking them with his sword. This would be the Serbian flag in the background, and there's a map here. This where the Macedonian maiden and the horse are. This is a map of Macedonia, a rather enlarged version. Traditionally, Macedonian territory is not considered to be quite this large. This Salonika would be here. And all this territory here, this goes down into what we now would think of as Thessaly. And over here is Thrace. So they've really got a very large version of Macedonia.
My suggestion on the two letters in front of King Peter would likely be some, based on a lot of Arabic stuff, is His Excellency or something like that. That's very common in the Arabic languages to have some kind of His Excellency, or
even in English,
Her Majesty, HM.
Sure, it's probably something like that. Yes, I mean I can identify those Cyrillic letters, but I just don't know what they stand for. This is, as I said, immediately after the end of the First Balkan War, there was an event called the Battle of Monastir in November of 1912. And then it was followed by Serbian occupation of this town. Here we have a piece of postal history from immediately afterwards. This is from 1913, January of 1913. And you see there's no stamp. They don't have any Serbian stamps to use, but they did come up with a postmark, Bitola, in Cyrillic and in Latin letters. The Serbians spell it with what looks like a J on the end, and I believe they pronounce it Bitola. And it's spelled normally Bitola. I would love to be able to read this. I can't read it. I can tell where it's going. This is Leskovac, another town actually it's now in Serbia, but it would then have been considered part of Macedonia, at least according to the enlarged version of the territory that we saw on the map. Here is an example of postal history from a little bit later period. This is 1915. So between the end of the First Balkan War and the outbreak of World War I, the area was controlled mainly by Serbia. It was the northern part of Macedonia was incorporated into Serbia, and the lower part into Greece. This is Bulgarian occupation with a censor marking. It reads censor section or censor department, something like that. There also are some initials on the bottom. I'm talking about this purple imprint. This is a censor marking. And the initials on the bottom, I cannot interpret. Anyway, this is a letter sent from Uskub, now known as Skopje, the capital of the present day Republic of Northern Macedonia, to Salonika, Greece. And I notice it's Isaac M. Saltiel, it looks like. Isaac, probably a Jewish name, and Salonika at that time was a major center of Jewish settlement. Something like at least a quarter of the population of Salonika was Jewish at that time. Notice it says by way of Sofia. So, and that's not a direct, Sofia is not in a direct line from Skopje to Salonika. But because of the occupation, I guess they took the mail from Skopje and sent it to Sofia, and then from there to Salonika. Here's another view of Monastir. And here it says view to Bukovan, view de Bukovan. And I assume that's a French version. I cannot find this name. I tried Googling it and it is not to be found. But it may be some kind of a version, and I'll get to the what's going on with this name in a moment. Here, okay, so let's get into the name. The term monastery derives from the Greek monadzane, meaning to live alone, and refers to a dwelling for those who have withdrawn from society for religious reasons. According to numerous sources, the name Monastir arose from the presence of a famous monastery there. Bitola derives from an old Slavonic word for monastery. So this makes the name Bitola what's called a calque of monastir. It's a name derived from another name by translation of the meaning rather than by an imitation of the sound of the word. I thought this was fascinating. I never heard of it, calque, before. But that is apparently how it comes about. Bitola means a monastery in Serbian. Now, okay, Bukovan, not known to Google, but Bukovina means monastery in Romanian, for whatever that's worth.
Maybe it's the mountains called Bukovan. Maybe the mountain in the background is called Bukovan.
Well, that's a good point.
I was going to suggest that in Greek, bu means bull, like Bucephalus, Alexander's horse. So I was thinking along the same lines as Patrick, that maybe that's Bull Mountain, or maybe Koven means something.
I think your original guess that it's Romanian for monastery, that makes the most sense of anything we've mentioned.
Well, I do think we ought to at least do some further exploration of the name of that mountain. There's a very distinct mountain peak in the background there, and the card is labeled, view of Bukovan or Bukoven, whatever, and then in parentheses Monastir, which could just be a reference to the location from which you were viewing that peak. Anyway, this is an alternative theory that I think we should consider until we get a definite answer. This is this is the back of the card, the back of the view that we were just looking at, and again, it's from the Bulgarian. And this is 1916. The Bulgarians were there from November of 1915 all the way till the end of the war in 1918. And they used these censor markings. I have not been able to completely decipher that. It seems to say something like telegraph and postage, but I can't read the rest of it. The card is going to a place called Kumanovo, which is in Macedonia. In fact, it's in the current Republic of North Macedonia, not far from Skopje. And here, this is the censor marking in a way that you can read it more easily. It's got the Bulgarian lion on it, the name of the location, Prilep. All right, now, here we have some mysterious items I got on eBay. The seller knew very little about them. They're inscribed Kingdom of Macedonia. All these items, I showed a set of stamps labeled Macedonia with the Bulgarian lion on them. And whenever you see these so-called local issues advertised, they're always said to be related to something called the Ilinden uprising in 1903, a famous outbreak of violence in which the Macedonian nationalists actually took over a number of villages, but then were later driven out and severely punished by the Turks. But I'm not convinced that these stamps come from the Ilinden uprising, because there are accounts from much later times, from the 1920s, of Macedonian nationalist groups issuing their own stamps. Now, at that time, the territory was part of Yugoslavia. It was not called Yugoslavia then, it was called the Kingdom of Serbs, Croats, and Slovenes. But the name was later changed to Yugoslavia. And the Macedonians were obviously upset that their nationality wasn't recognized. They didn't have, they felt they should have autonomy within Yugoslavia, or better yet, a completely independent kingdom. But who this gentleman is on the stamps, I have no idea. I would love to know more about these. Who made them, when and where. But there they are.
Do we know anyone who claimed to be the king of Macedonia?
I do not.
Huh.
No. And there are more of these. This is apparently another person that, with a weird looking flame coming out of his eye. At least that's what it looks like to me. And again, it's Kingdom of Macedonia, but that's all you get. And it is the denominations are in para. This is Turkish currency. Para, and the other ones are dinara. That's some kind of a clue, but not enough for me to go on.
The first portrait looks military.
Right, he's got what looks like a military collar.
None of your catalogs mention these at all.
No.
Huh.
Well, this would have nothing to do with the Greeks. This is all are Slavic people living to the north in the northern part of Macedonia.
Unless of course they're part of Greece.
Well, the southern part of Macedonia is part of Greece, but the northern part is not. And it's even though there were Greeks living there at one time, the population of the northern part of Macedonia is primarily either Serbian, Bulgarian, or Albanian. They're clearly local issues, possibly of no postal value. But even so, there might be some catalog that would show them or at least mention them. But so far I have not found it. Okay, we're moving into modern times now, although this is a very ancient structure. This is a mosque in Monastir or Bitola. This card is from 1958, when the territory was part of Yugoslavia. It has a very common Yugoslavian stamp. And it's canceled Bitola in Cyrillic and in Latin characters. 1958. This is actually an Albanian stamp going to Bitola, but I include this in this presentation because this is a very interesting stamp. This stamp, when it was issued, was not known to the stamp collecting world or even the UPU. Albania issued lots and lots of stamps, for sale to collectors primarily, which they just shipped overseas and didn't even sell in Albania. But they issued other stamps only for use in Albania, which were not sent abroad. And so these were only discovered years after they were issued, because suddenly they started showing up on letters and postcards. It's called the industry issue from 1971. You'll find it in Scott. The numbers are numbers with letters after them because they were inserted in the catalog later, after the numbering had already passed that point. The catalog value of the used stamp is $160, which is quite a lot more than any of the other stamps of that period from Albania, because they're hard to get. You rarely see them. They were only used, and Albania did not send a lot of mail, certainly not overseas. Finally, we get to the current Republic of North Macedonia. The name of, the dispute over the name with Greece was settled in 2019. And this is another famous mosque. And it's inscribed, the two languages here are Macedonian and Albanian. And the stamp, you'll notice, has inscribed in Cyrillic characters, and this is Albanian uses the Latin alphabet. So that's the Albanian version, and those are the two primary populations in the country now, Macedonians and Albanians, and Republic of North Macedonia. So, okay, here are these lion stamps that I mentioned. Once again, I have no idea when or why they were made, but subject for further research. All right, that's it.